In this video, I'm going to demonstrate a piece of custom functionality from the SOLIDWORKS programming team. This command has been integrated neatly into the software as part of our SOLIDWORKS add-in, and it allows you to import point data directly into SOLIDWORKS. This point data can come from many different sources, such as a scan, old records, or even something that's been mathematically generated, say in Excel. After importing the point data, there are options on whether you want to create a new part or not, as well as being able to specify what units you need to use and how do you want to use that data, whether it's to create a series of points, lines, arcs, or a single spline. For this import, I'm going to choose to create a spline, and this very quickly and easily imports the points and creates a 3D curve that runs through them. Here's another example where I brought in the point data for two profiles. Once this curve is created, it's simple to generate a loft by picking both profiles and lining up the main connector. So hopefully you can see how this command can be used and how much time it could save for some users. If you currently have a task like this, which you think could be sped up or automated by a custom programming solution, then please get in touch with us either by phone or by filling in our online form.